Our epics are a reservoir of ancient narratives. They've been shaping cultural and spiritual fabric for our country. And we are in a literary festival right now, and I won't be wrong in saying that Ramayana and Mahabharata are the perpetual bestsellers for thousands of years. Amish, what is it that continues to inspire, engage, and keep the readers, and not just the readers, but even writers, so interested in these epics?
The lines that you just quoted
Are
at the beginning are actually from the Vishnu Puran, which historians tell us is maybe 2,500 years old. But there are many who say it's probably a lot older. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Many Indians like to think we are unique. We are not. There are many other cultures like us. It's just that we've survived. That's all. And I think the foundational answer to your question is, why have we survived? It won't be fair to say that we were stronger than pharaonic Egyptians or deeper than Gilgamesh Mesopotamians. That's not true. They were as deep and fine cultures. I think the greatest legacy our ancestors gave to us is that our culture is a wonderful mix of rigidity and flexibility. When a storm comes, a cyclone comes to Odisha very often, if the tree is too rigid, it'll get blown over. But if you have no rigidity, if you're like Kusha grass, then everyone just walks all over you. Then you have no identity either. But if you have the right amount of flexibility when the storms come, so you can bend back, but then equally the right amount of rigidity that you can come back when the storm blows over, then you can keep your culture alive. And that to me is what our stories allows us to do. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are, of course, they go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but they're also flexible. So that when a new age comes, a new era, a new idiom, the stories actually get adapted. And that's what keeps these stories alive. And that's what helps keep our culture alive. What is culture? It's food you eat, the clothes you wear, how your society organizes itself, and the stories you believe in, the stories you follow.
Do you think those liberties somewhere distort the truth in it? Because there is still, it is a belief that Ram, we know that Ram existed. He was our ancestor.
Of course he existed.
Yeah, and taking those...
Look, the word mythology does not come from the Sanskrit word mithya actually. Okay. It comes from the Greek word mythos. Yeah. Mythos doesn't mean untruth. Mythos means a story that hides the philosophical truth. And that's a way to look at mythology. In Sanskrit we say itihas. Thus it happened. In terms of different interpretations, I think if we ask many of them out here, is Lakshman Rekha there in the Ramayana? How many would say Lakshman Rekha is there in the Ramayana? Show of hands. Lakshman Rekha is there in the Ramayana. You've seen me ask this before. Yeah? That's because you saw it in a 1980s television serial. That's why many of you think Lakshman Rekha is there in the Ramayana. The way Lord Lakshman took an arrow and drew that line. In the original Valmiki Ramayana, Lakshman Rekha has not been mentioned. There is no, forget about the description, there is no mention of the Lakshman Rekha at all. The first, at least from the versions that I have read, the place where Lakshman Rekha is mentioned first is the Ramcharitmanas by Goswami Tulsidas ji, which was written in the 16th century. And even there, it's not described the way it's shown in the television serial. Now, this is a different interpretation. And no one would say Goswami Tulsidas ji took liberties. It was a creative and respectful interpretation. Liberties is a very Western term, that I am this brilliant creative guy and I'll take liberties and you have to accept me for who I am. I think that's a very arrogant approach. In the Indian way, we do interpretations of our most loved stories, which are usually always the Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Puranas. And this tradition has been there for thousands of years. You don't just Ramcharitmanas is one example of this, but you find so many versions of the Ramayana. Kritibhashi Ramayana from
Of course, and there's a
Bengal,
Sita's
Kamba
Ramayana.
Ramayanam
Yeah, there's a
from
Sita's Ramayana
the
as well,
Tamil
which is
version,
told from
the Adbhut Ramayana, which is also credited to Valmiki ji,
Right.
in which Sita Ma killed Ravan. She's a warrior. In that, my Sita warrior of Mithila is inspired by that version.
Right.
And not just in what can be called religious or spiritual texts, even in our plays, in Sanskrit plays, for example. Kalidasa made many changes from the Skanda Puran
Right.
when he wrote Kumara Sambhavam. It was celebrated in his era as well. Bhasa, who was the greatest Sanskrit playwright ever, Kalidas himself said Bhasa was the greatest Sanskrit playwright ever. He wrote Pancharatra, which is an interpretation of the Mahabharata, where the war didn't happen, right? And it's Bhasa would have been at least 2,500 years ago, and Bhasa is considered the greatest playwright ever. For all of us who are Indians, he's the greatest playwright ever, not just the greatest Sanskrit playwright. And it wasn't taking liberties; it was a respectful interpretation, because all of us Indians want to hear the stories of our gods again and again and again in different ways. That's the Indian tradition.
Fascinating, but that also brings up a question of whether writers of this genre are under a constant pressure to remain within the dharmic fold, so to say.
Dharma is flexible, right? And I do interpretations, but at the core there should be respect. So you find books which generate controversies, movies which generate controversies, and sadly often controversies are created with the help of their friends in the media. We all know what happens, sadly. I know there's some media people here, don't take this the wrong way, but we all know what happens. It's a very cheap marketing strategy. If you yourself avoid controversy as an artist, it usually doesn't happen. In my case, there's been no controversies. But I think also if you write with respect, Indians don't mind a different interpretation as long as you write with respect. And I can give you examples even in books. You can say, even if it's a few million copies, even if it's 7-8 million copies, it's not as mass as movies. Fair enough. But in movies, I can give you examples which, if you write a script, it would appear like yaar controversy ho jayega. Like if you went to a Bollywood producer in Mumbai and said shoot a scene where the main hero breaks the base of a shivling and then carries it to a waterfall and then places it under the waterfall. So, yaar, bahut controversy hoga. But in Bahubali, it's one of our most iconic scenes ever because it was shot with respect. Rajamouli ji is, from all that I know, he genuinely is a believing Hindu. He actually worships the gods. He shows in his movies. So it reflected in the scene. There was no controversy. Indians don't mind a different interpretation as long as you do it with respect. That's been my learning.